The signal pierced through the cosmic background radiation like a desperate scream in the void. Deep within the Kepler research station, orbiting the outer rim of the Sol system, Dr. Elena Vasquez stared at her monitoring equipment with growing alarm. The transmission was unlike anything in the galactic database. A chaotic mixture of electromagnetic pulses, gravitational waves, and quantum-entangled particles that somehow managed to encode a message across impossible distances. Computer, run Linguistic Analysis Protocol 77 Alpha, Elena commanded, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The artificial intelligence hummed to life, processing terabytes of data in milliseconds. Analysis complete, Dr. Vasquez. The transmission appears to originate from the Andromeda spiral, approximately 2.5 million light-years distant. Message content suggests extreme distress. Translating now. The words that appeared on her screen made Elena's blood run cold. This is the Zephyrian Republic. Our worlds burn. The Devourers have come. If any civilization receives this message, know that we fought to our last breath. Do not come for us. Save yourselves. The darkness spreads. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for the emergency communication panel. This was the first confirmed contact with an extragalactic civilization, and it was a death scream. The implications were staggering. If the Zephyrians possessed the technology to send messages across the intergalactic void, they were likely far more advanced than humanity. Yet something called the Devourers had apparently overwhelmed them. Within hours, the message had reached every major government and military installation on Earth and throughout the solar system. The United Earth Defense Council convened an emergency session, while the Colonial Marine Corps went to high alert. Admiral Sarah Chun, commander of the Terran fleet, studied the data from her flagship, the UES Indomitable, as it hung in geosynchronous orbit above Earth. How certain are we that this signal is genuine? Admiral Chun asked Dr. Marcus Webb, the fleet's chief xenobiologist, as they stood in the ship's war room surrounded by holographic displays showing star charts and tactical projections. Dr. Webb adjusted his glasses nervously. The quantum signatures are unlike anything we could fabricate with current technology, Admiral. The mathematical complexity of the transmission protocol alone suggests a civilization with capabilities far beyond our own. I believe it's authentic. And these Devourers they mentioned? Unknown. But given the desperation in the message and the apparent technological superiority of the Zephyrians, we may be dealing with a threat of unprecedented magnitude. Admiral Chin nodded grimly. Humanity had always known this day might come. The day they encountered something in the cosmos that viewed them not as fellow sapients, but as prey. The galaxy was vast and largely unexplored beyond the local group, but they had always assumed they would have more time to prepare. Admiral, interrupted Lieutenant Commander Torres from the communication station, we're receiving similar distress signals from 7 other star systems, all in different galaxies, all reporting attacks by something called the Devourers. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. 8 galaxies under attack simultaneously. The scope was beyond comprehension. Admiral Chun felt the weight of humanity's future settling on her shoulders. Sir, came another voice, this time from the tactical station. Long-range sensors are detecting massive gravitational anomalies at the edge of our local galactic cluster. Whatever's out there, it's big. Really big. Dr. Webb pulled up additional data on his tablet. Admiral, I've been analyzing the patterns in these distress calls. The attacks aren't random. There's a systematic approach. They're moving through galaxies in a spiral pattern, consuming everything in their path. Based on current trajectories and the timestamps on these messages, I estimate they'll reach the Milky Way in approximately 18 months. 18 months to prepare for a threat that had apparently overwhelmed multiple galactic civilizations. Admiral Chin closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the enormity of the situation. When she opened them again, her expression had hardened into the look that had earned her the nickname, the Iron Admiral. All right, people, send a priority alpha message to Earth Command. We need every ship, every weapon, every piece of advanced technology humanity has ever developed. And we need it yesterday. She turned to Dr. Webb. Doctor, I want you to analyze every scrap of data from these transmissions. Find me weaknesses, patterns, anything that might give us an edge. What about responding to the distress calls, Admiral? Asked Torres. Shouldn't we try to offer assistance? Admiral Chun looked at the vast star field displayed on the main screen, where distant galaxies appeared as mere points of light. How do you send help across 2.5 million light years, Lieutenant Commander? By the time any rescue mission reached them, even at our fastest speeds, billions of years would have passed. No, our only option is to prepare for their arrival here. As the Indomitable and the rest of the fleet began their journey back to Earth, Admiral Chun couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to face humanity's greatest test. The species that had clawed its way up from the African savanna, that had survived ice ages and plagues and wars, was about to face something that viewed entire galaxies as hunting grounds. Meanwhile, in the deep reaches of intergalactic space, something ancient and hungry stirred. The Devourers had been feeding for eons, moving from galaxy to galaxy in an endless cycle of consumption. They had encountered countless civilizations, some that fought, some that fled, some that tried to hide. None had succeeded in stopping them. But they had never encountered a species quite like humanity. They had never faced a people who had earned their place in the cosmos through sheer bloody-minded determination and an absolute refusal to accept extinction. The Devourers were about to learn why the other species of the galaxy had started calling Earth a death world, and its inhabitants the most terrifyingly persistent form of life anyone had ever encountered. The message from the Zephyrians continued to echo across the stars, a warning and a challenge rolled into one. But humanity had never been very good at heeding warnings about impossible odds. They had a tendency to interpret them as invitations instead. As Admiral Chin stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching Earth grow larger in the view screen, she allowed herself a grim smile. The Devourers might have destroyed 8 galaxies, but they had never faced the Children of Sol. They were about to discover that some prey fought back with a ferocity that could shake the very foundations of space and time. The die was cast. In 18 months, the dark tide would reach the Milky Way. But humanity would be ready. They had to be. The alternative was unthinkable, and humans had always specialized in doing the unthinkable when their backs were against the wall. The first shots of the greatest war in galactic history were about to be fired, and Admiral Sarah Chun intended to make sure that when the dust settled, it would be human flags flying over the wreckage of the Devourer fleet. The galaxy might tremble at their approach, but it would shake even harder when the Deathworlders answered the call. Dr. Vasquez's discovery at the Kepler Research Station had changed everything. What had started as routine monitoring of cosmic background radiation had become the warning shot that would rally every human military force in existence. The message from the Zephyrians had been clear. The darkness was spreading, and it was coming for them all. But the Zephyrians had made one crucial mistake in their final message. They had told any listening civilizations to save themselves, to avoid the fate that had befallen their republic. They had assumed that the logical response to their warning would be flight, hiding, or desperate preparation for the inevitable. They had clearly never met a human being. As the emergency klaxons echoed through every human military installation from Earth to the furthest colonial outposts, a single message began broadcasting on all frequencies. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Council. The Terran fleet is assembling. All available ships report for duty. We have 18 months to prepare for war. Let's show these Devourers what happens when you threaten humanity's home. The response was immediate and overwhelming. From the mining colonies of the asteroid belt to the research stations orbiting distant pulsars, every human settlement began mobilizing. The species that had turned warfare into an art form was about to demonstrate why evolution had made them the apex predators of their homeworld. The Devourers were coming, but they were about to learn that some prey was too dangerous to hunt, and that humanity had not crawled to the top of the food chain by accepting defeat. The galaxy would indeed tremble, but not from fear of the approaching darkness. It would shake from the fury of a species that had just been told their extinction was inevitable, and had responded with a collective declaration of war against the cosmos itself. The stage was set for the greatest battle in the history of the universe. On one side, an ancient force that had consumed galaxies for eons. On the other, a young species that had never learned the meaning of surrender. The outcome would determine not just the fate of the Milky Way, but whether the concept of resistance itself would survive in a universe increasingly dominated by darkness. And deep in the command center of the UES Indomitable, Admiral Chun began planning humanity's response to an impossible threat. She had 18 months to turn the Terran fleet into a force capable of standing against galaxy killers. It was an impossible task with impossible odds, which made it exactly the kind of challenge that brought out the best in her species. The Devourers were about to discover that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their numbers. It was their absolute inability to accept that anything in the universe could be truly unstoppable. They were about to face a species that had built its entire civilization on the principle that every problem had a solution, and that sufficient application of violence could solve any equation. The alien SOS had echoed across the stars, carrying its message of doom and despair. But humanity had heard something else entirely in that signal, a challenge, a call to arms, and an opportunity to prove once and for all that the children of Earth bowed to no one, not even the darkness between galaxies. The war for the survival of galactic civilization was about to begin, and humanity was preparing to answer that call with everything they had. The Devourers might have the advantage of numbers, experience, and ancient technology, but they had never faced an enemy that treated extinction as merely another obstacle to overcome, and whose response to overwhelming odds was to double down and fight harder. The message from the Zephyrians had been received, translated, and understood, but humanity's response would be written in fire and forged in the crucible of interstellar war. The galaxy was about to witness the birth of a legend that would echo through the cosmos long after the last star burned out. The legend of the day the Deathworlders said no to the darkness, and meant it. The shipyards of Luna had never seen such frantic activity. What had once been orderly construction schedules were thrown aside in favor of around-the-clock emergency production. The skeletal frameworks of humanity's new warships rose like metal forests against the stark lunar landscape, while automated construction drones swarmed over them like mechanical insects. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of Shipyard Alpha 7, watching the construction of what would become humanity's answer to the Devourer threat. The ship taking shape before him was unlike anything in the Terran fleet's current inventory. A massive dreadnought that stretched nearly 3 kilometers from bow to stern, bristling with weapons systems that existed only in theoretical physics papers just months ago. "She's beautiful," said Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the lead weapons engineer, as she joined Morrison at the viewing window. "And absolutely terrifying." The ship they were watching was the UES Retribution, the first of the new Apocalypse-class dreadnoughts. Its hull was constructed from metamaterials that could shift between different molecular configurations, allowing it to absorb and redistribute energy from enemy weapons. The main gun was a gravitational singularity cannon capable of creating temporary black holes and hurling them at targets. It was a weapon that violated several laws of physics and at least 3 interstellar treaties that humanity had never signed. "How many more like her can we build in the time we have?" Morrison asked. 17 are currently under construction here at Luna. Earth's orbital shipyards are producing another 23. The colonial yards at Mars, Europa, and Titan are each building smaller variants. All told, we'll have about 75 capital ships of various classes ready for combat in 14 months. Morrison nodded, though privately he wondered if it would be enough. The reports from the deep space monitoring stations painted a picture of an enemy force that defied comprehension. Whatever the Devourers were, they moved between galaxies as easily as human ships traveled between star systems. Initial estimates suggested their fleet numbered in the hundreds of thousands, possibly millions. "What about the special projects?" he asked. Dr. Tanaka's expression grew serious. "Project Prometheus is proceeding ahead of schedule. We've successfully weaponized quantum vacuum decay, though the testing has to be done in isolated dimensional pockets to avoid accidentally destroying our own solar system. Project Atlas has produced our first functioning planet killer, though we're still working out how to prevent it from killing the planet we're standing on when we fire it." The desperation in humanity's response was evident in every project name, every classified weapons program that had been dusted off and given unlimited funding. They were developing technologies that their own scientists warned could destroy the universe if misused, but facing extinction had a way of adjusting one's tolerance for acceptable risks. Across the solar system, similar scenes of frantic preparation were playing out. The asteroid mining stations had been converted into automated factories, stripping entire asteroids down to their component molecules and rebuilding them as warships. The research stations around Jupiter's moons had become testing grounds for experimental weapons that made nuclear devices look like firecrackers. But humanity's greatest advantage wasn't their technology, it was their ability to adapt and improvise. While the engineers built bigger guns and stronger shields, the tacticians were developing strategies that no sane military academy would have approved. Admiral Chun stood in the Tactical Planning Center deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain, studying holographic displays that showed the current disposition of human forces. Around her, the brightest military minds humanity had produced worked around the clock to solve an impossible puzzle: how to defeat an enemy that had never been defeated. "Admiral," called out Colonel Maria Santos, the fleet's chief strategist, "we've completed our analysis of the Devourer attack patterns based on the alien transmissions. They appear to follow a standard galactic consumption protocol. They establish beachheads in outer systems, then work their way inward, consuming everything in their path." "And how do they consume entire star systems?" Admiral Chen asked. "The energy signatures suggest they have some form of stellar engineering capability. They appear to be literally dismantling stars and converting the matter into more ships. Each galaxy they conquer makes them exponentially stronger." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just facing an enemy fleet. They were facing an enemy that grew stronger by destroying everything in its path. It was a military strategist's worst nightmare, an opponent with unlimited resources and no apparent weaknesses. "There has to be something," Admiral Chen muttered, studying the data streams flowing across her screens. "Nothing in the universe is invincible. Find me their weak point." Dr. Webb entered the planning center carrying a thick stack of printouts and data tablets. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the quantum signatures from the alien distress calls. I think I may have found something." "Talk to me, Doctor." "The Devourers don't appear to be a single species. The energy patterns suggest there's some kind of collective consciousness, billions of individual organisms operating as a hive mind. But here's the interesting part. The quantum entanglement that maintains their collective consciousness operates on a specific frequency." Admiral Chen leaned forward. "You're suggesting we can disrupt their coordination?" "Potentially, yes. But the power requirements would be enormous. We need to generate a quantum interference pattern strong enough to disrupt entanglement across an entire galactic region. The energy cost would be astronomical." Admiral Chen finished. "How astronomical?" Dr. Webb consulted his notes nervously. "We need to channel the total energy output of approximately 50 stars simultaneously. It's theoretically possible, but the engineering challenges would be—" "Doctor," Admiral Chen interrupted, 18 months ago, faster-than-light communication was theoretically impossible. 6 months ago, we couldn't build a ship bigger than 2 kilometers without it collapsing under its own mass. Last month, weaponized artificial black holes were science fiction. What's one more impossibility?" The truth was that humanity had been performing impossibilities on a regular basis since receiving the alien warning. Necessity had proven to be an incredibly effective motivator for scientific advancement. Technologies that should have taken decades to develop were being implemented in months. Physical laws that had been considered absolute were being rewritten with alarming regularity. Meanwhile, in the outer reaches of the solar system, humanity's early warning network detected the first signs of the approaching threat. The Kuiper Belt monitoring stations registered gravitational anomalies that suggested something massive was moving through the void between galaxies. The signals were still faint, but they were growing stronger. Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded the Deep Space Reconnaissance Vessel UES Pathfinder, one of the fastest ships in the Terran fleet. Her mission was simple in concept, but terrifying in execution. Get close enough to the approaching Devourer fleet to gather intelligence. Then, return with whatever data she could collect before being destroyed. "Captain," called out her science officer, Lieutenant Park, "we're detecting massive gravitational disturbances approximately 2 light-years ahead. Whatever's coming, it's changing the fundamental structure of space-time just by moving through it." The Pathfinder was equipped with humanity's most advanced stealth technology, including experimental quantum phase shifters that could theoretically make the ship undetectable to most forms of scanning. But Captain Rodriguez suspected that wouldn't matter against an enemy that had been conquering galaxies since before Earth-Sun was formed. "Take us in slowly," she ordered. "Full passive sensors, minimal power emissions. If we're detected, our job becomes getting this data back to Earth." As the Pathfinder crept forward through the void, its sensors began picking up readings that defied explanation. The space ahead of them was filled with structures the size of planets, moving in formations that stretched across light years. Ships, if they could be called ships, that dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Park, staring at his sensor readings. "Captain, I'm detecting at least 50,000 major vessels, each one larger than our biggest space stations. And behind them, there are more. Thousands more. The formation extends beyond our sensor range." Captain Rodriguez felt her mouth go dry. 50,000 ships, each one a potential planet killer. And that was just the advanced scouts. "Lieutenant, begin recording everything. Every energy signature, every movement pattern, every scrap of data we can collect. This intelligence has to get back to Earth." But even as she spoke, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Something had detected them. "Captain, multiple energy signatures converging on our position. They're moving at impossible speeds, faster than light travel without apparent transition to hyperspace." "All stop," Rodriguez ordered. "Prepare to transmit our data on a tight beam burst to Earth. If we don't make it back, someone needs to know what's coming." The first Devourer scout vessel appeared on their screens like a nightmare given form. It was organic in appearance, all flowing curves and predatory grace, but clearly artificial in construction. Weapons ports opened along its hull like hungry mouths, and energy readings spiked to levels that shouldn't have been possible. "Data transmission complete," reported the communications officer. "Earth Command should receive our intelligence in approximately 4 hours." "Good," Captain Rodriguez said grimly. "Now let's see if we can learn anything else before they kill us." But, to everyone's surprise, the Devourer ship didn't immediately attack. Instead, it seemed to be studying them, scanning the Pathfinder with energy beams that made their instruments go haywire. Then, impossibly, it began transmitting. The signal was unlike anything in human experience. A complex mixture of electromagnetic radiation, gravitational pulses, and quantum fluctuations that somehow formed coherent information. When the ship's computer finally decoded it, the message was chilling in its simplicity. Small metal creatures in fragile shell. "You are from Feeding Ground Designation, Local Group Galaxy Spiral Formation 7. We taste your thoughts through the void. You believe you can resist consumption. This belief amuses the collective. We have consumed 10,000 galaxies. Your resistance will provide brief entertainment before digestion." Captain Rodriguez stared at the message for a long moment, then activated the ship's communication array. Her response was equally simple. "This is Captain Lisa Rodriguez of the United Earth Defense Force. You want to consume our galaxy? Come and try. But I should warn you, we've been spoiling for a good fight since we invented fire, and you're about to discover why evolution made us apex predators. Earth is preparing a welcome party that you won't soon forget." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Energy beams lashed out from the Devourer vessel, but Captain Rodriguez had already given the order to jump to hyperspace. The Pathfinder vanished into the space between dimensions just as reality itself seemed to burn around them. They had gathered the intelligence they needed, and, more importantly, they had delivered humanity's message to the enemy. The Devourers might have consumed 10,000 galaxies, but they had never faced a species that considered impossible odds to be an invitation to prove everyone wrong. As the Pathfinder raced back toward Earth with its precious cargo of intelligence data, Captain Rodriguez allowed herself a brief smile. The enemy might outnumber them 1,000,000 to 1. They might possess technologies that humanity couldn't even comprehend, but they had just made the fatal mistake of telling humans that resistance was futile. In the history of the galaxy, no phrase had ever motivated humanity quite like being told that something was impossible. They had a long and proud tradition of proving the universe wrong about such things, and they were about to add one more impossibility to their list. The day a single galaxy stood up to the darkness and won. The intelligence gathered by the Pathfinder would revolutionize humanity's understanding of what they faced, but it would also reveal their greatest advantage. The Devourers had grown complacent after eons of easy victories. They had forgotten that some species didn't know how to surrender, and they were about to receive a very educational reminder of what that meant. The war was coming, and humanity was ready to show the universe what happened when you threatened a Deathworld species that had spent its entire existence refusing to accept the word no. The Devourers wanted a galaxy to consume. Instead, they were about to discover that some meals fought back, and that the children of Earth had very sharp teeth indeed. The intelligence brought back by the UES Pathfinder changed everything. The war rooms of Earth fell silent as Admiral Chun and her senior staff reviewed the sensor data, watching holographic displays that showed the true scope of what humanity faced. The Devourer fleet wasn't just massive. It was a living civilization dedicated entirely to consumption and expansion. Each of these vessels appears to be a self-contained ecosystem, Dr. Webb reported, manipulating the three-dimensional displays to highlight different aspects of the enemy's ships. They're not just warships, they're mobile worlds, capable of processing raw matter from consumed planets into new vessels and crew members. The largest ones appear to house populations in the billions. General Patricia Stone, commander of the Solar Defense Grid, studied the tactical projections with growing concern. If their smallest scout ships are the size of our space stations, how exactly do we expect to fight them with conventional weapons? Admiral Chun had been wondering the same thing. Human military doctrine had always relied on superior tactics and technology to overcome numerical disadvantages, but this was beyond anything they had ever contemplated. The enemy possessed both overwhelming numbers and technologies that seemed to violate fundamental laws of physics. "We don't fight them conventionally," she said finally. "We fight them like humans." The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at her. Admiral Chun moved to the central display, pulling up star charts that showed the current position of both fleets. "Look at their approach vector. They're coming straight at us, following the most direct route between galaxies. They're used to enemies that either flee or make desperate lasts stand around their home worlds. They're not expecting us to take the fight to them." Colonel Santos leaned forward. "You're suggesting we intercept them between galaxies? In open space? I'm suggesting we do what humans have always done best, fight dirty. They want to consume our star systems? Let's give them something poisonous to swallow." Over the following weeks, the most audacious military operation in human history began to take shape. Rather than waiting for the Devourers to reach the Milky Way, humanity would strike first, hitting them in the void between galaxies where their numerical advantage would be reduced and their support systems stretched thin. The plan that emerged from those strategy sessions was so insane that it might actually work. Operation Prometheus called for the entire human fleet to jump beyond the galaxy's edge, establish forward operating bases around rogue planets in intergalactic space, and begin a campaign of guerrilla warfare against the approaching enemy. The beauty of this approach, Admiral Chun explained to the assembled fleet commanders, is that they're expecting us to defend fixed positions. Instead, we're going to be everywhere and nowhere, hitting them where they least expect it, then vanishing before they can respond effectively. Captain Sarah Kim of the UES Defiance raised her hand. Admiral, with respect, this plan requires us to abandon our entire civilization. If we fail, Earth will be defenseless. Captain, if we wait for them to reach our galaxy, Earth will be defenseless anyway. At least this way, we choose the time and place of battle. The next phase of preparation saw humanity's industrial capacity pushed beyond all reasonable limits. The asteroid belt was stripped of material to build the mobile shipyards that would accompany the fleet. Entire moons were converted into ammunition factories, producing exotic weapons that existed nowhere else in the known universe. Dr. Tanaka's weapons development teams had made breakthrough after breakthrough, each more terrifying than the last. Project Pandora had produced the first successful reality bombs, weapons that created localized tears in the fabric of space-time. Project Nemesis had developed the quantum cascade torpedoes, which could theoretically destroy matter on a subatomic level. But humanity's most devastating weapon wasn't technological, it was psychological. They had learned to think like predators, to strike fear into an enemy that had forgotten what fear meant. Lieutenant Colonel David Park commanded the Special Operations Unit known as the Reapers, elite soldiers equipped with experimental power armor that made them nearly unstoppable in close combat. His mission was to lead boarding actions against Devourer vessels, disrupting their operations from within. Remember, he told his team as they prepared for their first insertion, these things have been conquering galaxies for eons. They think they're the ultimate predators. Our job is to remind them that there's always something higher up the food chain. The Reaper armor was a marvel of human engineering, incorporating adaptive nanotechnology that could repair damage in real time, personal shield generators capable of deflecting energy weapons, and close combat systems that would make a medieval knight weep with envy. Each suit was powered by a miniature fusion reactor and contained enough life support to operate in hard vacuum for weeks. As Operation Prometheus moved into its execution phase, something unexpected happened. The first alien responses to the Devourer threat began arriving on Earth. The Zentorian Confederacy, a coalition of silicon-based life forms from the Andromeda Galaxy, had somehow detected humanity's preparations and transmitted an offer of alliance. Their message was brief but compelling. Small warm bloods of Sol System, we have observed your battle preparations. Your response to extinction threat is admirable. We offer technological exchange. The Devourers consumed our homeworld. We seek vengeance. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, Earth's chief xenobiologist, found herself in the unprecedented position of negotiating humanity's first formal alien alliance. The Zentorians possessed technologies that could enhance human weapons systems, particularly in the areas of energy shielding and faster-than-light travel. In exchange, they wanted access to humanity's tactical innovations and what they called creative destruction protocols. They're fascinated by our approach to warfare, Dr. Harper reported to Admiral Chin. Apparently, most civilizations they've encountered follow predictable patterns when faced with extinction. We're the first species they've observed that responds to overwhelming odds by becoming more aggressive rather than less. Similar offers began arriving from other survivor species. The crystalline entities of the Magellanic Clouds, the energy beings of the Sculptor Galaxy, even a few scattered remnants of a Zephyrian republic that had managed to escape their galaxy's destruction. Each brought unique technologies and perspectives, but all were drawn by the same thing: humanity's absolute refusal to accept defeat. The alliance that formed around Earth's leadership was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Species that had never contacted each other before were sharing their most advanced technologies for a single purpose: stopping the Devourer's advance. Commander Zhang Wei of the Deep Space Reconnaissance Corps was among the first to benefit from this technological exchange. His ship, the UES Shadow, had been retrofitted with Centaurian phase shift technology, allowing it to operate in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The crystalline entities had provided quantum computing cores that made human artificial intelligences look primitive by comparison. The enemy fleet is still approximately 3 months out, he reported from his position at the edge of known space. But we're detecting changes in their formation. They appear to be adapting to our presence faster than anticipated. This was disturbing news. The Devourers had survived for eons by learning from each encounter, incorporating new technologies and tactics into their collective consciousness. If they were already adapting to humanity's preparations, it suggested an intelligence far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. Admiral Chin studied the latest intelligence reports with growing concern. The enemy wasn't just a mindless swarm. They were strategic thinkers capable of long-term planning and adaptation. Worse, they seemed to be accelerating their approach, as if they had identified humanity as a significant threat that needed to be eliminated quickly. They're not taking any chances with us, she realized. They've decided we're dangerous enough to warrant their full attention. The realization was both flattering and terrifying. In the span of 18 months, humanity had gone from being an unknown species on a backwater planet to being considered a significant threat by galaxy-consuming entities. It was a remarkable achievement that might also prove to be humanity's death sentence. But if the Devourers expected their acceleration to catch humanity off guard, they had seriously underestimated their opposition. The children of Earth had been preparing for war since they first picked up sticks and stones, and they had no intention of making this easy for their enemies. The final phase of Operation Prometheus saw the deployment of humanity's most secret weapon, the Odin Array. Built in the shadow of Pluto and powered by the controlled annihilation of antimatter, the Array was capable of manipulating space-time on a galactic scale. It was humanity's answer to the Devourer's collective consciousness, a weapon designed to disrupt the quantum entanglement that held their hive mind together. Dr. Chen Williams, the Array's chief designer, ran final diagnostics on the massive installation as the deadline approached. Admiral, the Array is ready for activation. But I need to warn you, the power requirements are so enormous that firing it will likely burn out every piece of technology in the solar system. We'll get one shot at this. One shot is all we need, Doctor. Can you guarantee it will work? Dr. Chun Williams hesitated. The theoretical models suggest a 97% chance of success in disrupting their collective consciousness within a radius of approximately 50 light-years. But, Admiral, we've never tested anything like this at full power. We could accidentally tear a hole in reality itself. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. It was a risk they would have to take. Humanity had committed everything to this operation. Their entire fleet, their most advanced technologies, and the survival of their species. There was no room for half measures. As the human fleet prepared to depart for intergalactic space, messages began broadcasting from Earth on all frequencies. Not military communications or tactical updates, but personal messages from families, lovers, and friends saying goodbye to the soldiers who might not return. The broadcasts reached every ship in the fleet, reminding them what they were fighting for. Not just the abstract concept of human survival, but the specific people and places that made life worth living. It was a uniquely human touch that the alien allies found both touching and bewildering. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution as the massive dreadnought prepared for its jump to intergalactic space. Around him, His crew worked with the quiet efficiency of professionals who knew they were about to attempt the impossible. "All stations report ready, Captain," called out his executive officer. "Very well. Signal the fleet. Operation Prometheus is a go. It's time to show the universe what happens when you threaten a Deathworld species." The human fleet vanished into hyperspace, carrying with them the hopes and prayers of an entire species. Behind them, Earth continued its preparations for the possibility that they might fail. But ahead of them lay the opportunity to prove that some prey fought back with teeth and claws sharp enough to cut through the darkness itself. The Devourers had conquered 10,000 galaxies, but they had never faced humanity. They were about to discover that evolution had produced something in a local group that they had never encountered before, a species so aggressively determined to survive that they would fight the universe itself if necessary. The war for the galaxy was about to begin, and humanity was taking it to the enemy on their own terms. The children of Earth were done being hunted. It was time to become the hunters and to show the cosmos that some things were too stubborn to die quietly. The darkness between galaxies was about to learn why the other species of the local group called Earth a death world, and why they had started to whisper about the terrifying persistence of its children. The Devourers wanted a meal. Instead, they were about to discover that they had bitten off more than they could chew, and that their next meal was very much interested in eating them first. The void between galaxies had never witnessed anything like the human fleet that materialized in its depths. 17,000 vessels of every size and configuration spread across a volume of space larger than most star systems, their hulls gleaming with alien technologies integrated into human designs. At the center of the formation, the massive UES Retribution served as flagship for an armada that represented the combined military might of dozen species united in desperate alliance. Admiral Chun stood in the command center of her flagship, surrounded by holographic displays showing the approaching Devourer fleet. The enemy had detected their presence immediately, but showed no signs of altering course. If anything, they seemed to be accelerating toward the human formation with what could only be described as eager anticipation. "Enemy force composition confirms our worst estimates," reported Commander Torres from the tactical station. "We're detecting over 2 million individual vessels, ranging from scout ships the size of our cruisers to battle stations that register as small moons on our sensors. Mass readings suggest their total fleet displacement exceeds that of several star systems combined." The numbers were staggering, but Admiral Chun had expected nothing less. The Devourers had been consuming galaxies for eons. Their accumulated mass and technology would naturally dwarf anything a single species could produce. But humanity had never won wars through superior numbers. They won through superior thinking, and they had been thinking very carefully about this engagement. "Signal the fleet," Admiral Chun commanded. "Exécutez formation Omega. Let's show them what we've learned about fighting impossible odds." The human fleet began to disperse, breaking into smaller task forces that spread throughout the operational area. Rather than meeting the enemy in traditional battle formation, they were implementing a strategy borrowed from Earth's own immune system. Multiple independent responses designed to confuse and overwhelm an invader. Captain Rodriguez, now commanding the experimental stealth carrier UES Phantom, watched her sensor displays as Devourer scout ships began probing the human formations. The enemy moved with the confidence of predators that had never encountered effective resistance, their massive vessels advancing in perfect coordination. "Launch the Wraiths," she ordered. From the Phantom's concealed launch bays, a swarm of the smallest combat vessels humanity had ever built began deploying. Each Wraith fighter was barely large enough for a single pilot, but they were packed with enough exotic weaponry to cripple ships 1,000 times their size. More importantly, they were designed to be invisible to the quantum scanning methods the Devourers relied upon. The first contact came without warning. A Devourer scout vessel the size of Manhattan suddenly found itself surrounded by what appeared to be empty space that was shooting at it. quantum torpedoes materialized from nowhere, tearing through alien shields that had never encountered weapons designed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Lieutenant Sarah Kim piloted her Wraith through the chaos, her neural interface allowing her to process combat information at superhuman speeds. The Zentorian brain-computer link felt strange, like having additional senses she had never possessed, but it gave her reaction times measured in nanoseconds rather than milliseconds. Target their quantum processors, she broadcast to her squadron as they swarmed around the massive enemy vessel. According to intelligence, those are the nodes that connect them to the collective consciousness. The battle that erupted was unlike anything in recorded history. Human weapons designed to violate physics met alien technologies that treated natural laws as suggestions. Space itself seemed to buckle and tear as reality bombs detonated against shields made of crystallized time, while matter conversion beams struck hulls that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. But the most shocking thing was that humanity was winning. The first Devourer vessel to fall sent ripples of confusion through the enemy fleet. They had encountered resistance before, but nothing that could actually destroy their ships. The scout vessel broke apart in a cascade of exotic energy, its death scream echoing across quantum frequencies as its connection to the collective was severed. Commander Park led the first boarding action against a Devourer heavy cruiser, his Reaper team cutting through the vessel's hull with weapons that could slice through the fabric of reality. What they found inside defied description, a living ship filled with creatures that seemed to be part machine, part organism, and part something else entirely. Contact, Park reported as his team encountered the first Devourer defenders. These things are definitely not natural evolution. They look like they've been assembled from parts of different species. The boarding action that followed would have been impossible for any other military force in the galaxy. The Reapers moved through the alien ship like avenging angels, their adaptive armor protecting them from weapons that could disintegrate matter on the molecular level, while their own guns carved through enemies that had never learned to fear anything. But the true devastation came from humanity's strategic innovations. Admiral Chun had studied the intelligence data carefully and identified the Devourer's greatest weakness. They were too successful. Eons of easy victories had made them predictable, dependent on tactics that had never failed them before. Execute Phoenix Protocol, Admiral Chun commanded as the battle reached its crescendo. Throughout the human fleet, ships began implementing the most audacious tactic ever conceived, controlled self-destruction designed to maximize damage to nearby enemies. The UES Defiance rammed itself into the core of a Devourer battle station, its quantum reactor set to overload in a specific pattern that would create a cascade failure in the alien ship's power systems. Captain Martinez activated the final sequence as her ship drove deep into the enemy vessel's heart. "Tell my family I went out fighting," she broadcast on all frequencies. "And tell the Devourers that this is what happens when you threaten humanity." The explosion that followed created a temporary star in the void between galaxies. The alien battle station, a vessel that had participated in the destruction of entire civilizations, simply ceased to exist. But, more importantly, the quantum feedback from its destruction disrupted the collective consciousness of every Devourer ship within a light-year radius. This was the signal Admiral Chun had been waiting for. Fire the Odin Array. Back in the Sol system, Dr. Chin Williams activated humanity's most powerful weapon. The Odin Array focused the total energy output of a dozen stars, channeling it through exotic matter conduits into a beam of pure disruption that crossed intergalactic space in seconds. The effect on the Devourer fleet was immediate and devastating. Ships that had operated in perfect coordination for eons suddenly found themselves isolated, their connection to the collective consciousness severed. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers experienced something they had forgotten how to process: individual fear. But Admiral Chun wasn't finished. All ships execute Operation Ragnarok. Target every quantum processing node you can identify. Cut them off from each other permanently. What followed was the most one-sided battle in galactic history. The Devourers had evolved to function as a collective consciousness, their individual units possessing little independent intelligence. Isolated from their hive mind, they became little more than sophisticated animals, dangerous but no longer coordinated. Human ships swarmed through the enemy formation like wolves among sheep, their alien-enhanced weapons carving through vessels that no longer knew how to respond effectively. The crystalline allies provided quantum disruptors that prevented the Devourers from re-establishing their neural links, while the energy beings of the Sculptor Galaxy created localized space-time distortions that trapped enemy ships in temporal loops. Captain Morrison watched from the bridge of the Retribution as his ship's main guns systematically dismantled a Devourer command vessel. The gravitational singularity cannon performed exactly as designed, creating miniature black holes that consumed enemy ships from the inside out. "Admiral," he reported, "enemy resistance is collapsing across all sectors. They're attempting to retreat, but our quantum interdiction fields are preventing effective withdrawal." For 18 months, humanity had prepared for a war they expected to lose. Instead, they had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had broken the Devourer's collective consciousness and turned the galaxy's greatest predators into scattered, isolated prey. But Admiral Chen knew this was only the beginning. The Devourer fleet in local space was just the advance guard of a force that spanned multiple galaxies. Breaking their immediate threat was only the first step in a much larger war. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Secure the battlefield and prepare for extended operations. We're going to follow them home and finish this properly." The human fleet began the systematic capture and analysis of Devourer technology, learning from their enemies' own innovations. What they discovered was both fascinating and horrifying. The Devourers were indeed a collective consciousness, but they were also something else. They were refugees. Dr. Webb's analysis of captured alien data cores revealed the truth. The Devourers had once been a peaceful species, possibly even herbivorous, that had been transformed by some cosmic catastrophe billions of years ago. Their endless hunger wasn't natural. It was a survival mechanism gone horribly wrong, a desperate attempt to preserve their species that had turned them into the very thing they had originally fled from. The revelation changed everything. This wasn't just a war for survival. It was an opportunity for redemption. Humanity had broken the Devourer's collective madness and revealed the traumatized civilization beneath. Now they faced a choice: complete the genocide they had begun, or attempt something far more difficult: healing a species that had been broken for eons. Admiral Chun made the decision that would define humanity's legacy in the galaxy. "We're going to cure them," she announced to her senior staff. "We're going to find whatever turned them into monsters and fix it. Because that's what humans do. We don't just solve problems, we solve them permanently." The war against the Devourers had lasted less than 6 hours. The campaign to heal an entire civilization would take generations. But humanity had always specialized in impossible projects, and they had just added cosmic therapy to their list of impossible achievements. As the human fleet began its journey toward the Devourer homeworlds, carrying both weapons of war and tools of healing, word spread throughout the galaxy. The species that called Earth a death world had done something unprecedented. They had defeated the galaxy's greatest threat not through superior firepower, but through superior understanding of what it meant to be broken and how to become whole again. The alien SOS that had echoed across the stars had indeed been answered, but not in the way anyone expected. The Deathworlders hadn't just saved the galaxy. They had shown it what it truly meant to be human. They had taken the universe's greatest monsters and chosen to heal them rather than destroy them, because that was what separated civilization from chaos. The galaxy trembled not from fear, but from wonder at what these strange, stubborn creatures from a backwater world were capable of accomplishing when they set their minds to it. They had answered the call for help with a solution so audacious, so fundamentally human, that it would echo through the cosmos long after the last star burned out. The message was clear: when the darkness comes, call the humans. They might not be the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced species in the universe, but they were the ones who would keep fighting until they found a way to turn the darkness back into light. Because that was what they did. They made the impossible possible, one stubborn refusal to give up at a time. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. Humanity had proven they could win the battle. Now they would prove they could win the peace, and in doing so, they would show the galaxy what it truly meant to be the guardians of hope in an often hopeless universe. The Deathworlders had answered the call, and the galaxy would never be the same.